Borrowed Belief Syndrome: How Others' Ideas Shape Your Life. Written by Ronnie Rowland. Published by Growth Literacy Lounge. You were born with a blank canvas, untouched and limitless, yet somewhere along the way, others began painting on it. Parents brushed in their notions of right and wrong. Teachers outlined the borders of what was realistic. Friends added splashes of approval and judgment. Layer by layer, without protest or awareness, your canvas filled with colors and shapes that were not entirely your own. One day, you step back and realize you're staring at a mural you didn't choose, living inside an artwork designed by borrowed beliefs. These beliefs do not arrive loudly. They slip in quietly, disguised as wisdom or truth. A well-meaning adult says, "Money doesn't grow on trees," and suddenly abundance feels like fantasy. A peer mocks a dream, and you file it away, convinced it was foolish to begin with. Over time, you mistake these hand-me-downs for reality itself. The brush passes from hand to hand until you forget you ever had one. This is borrowed belief syndrome, the inheritance of ideas we never question, rules we follow without knowing why, and assumptions so old they feel like facts. As Carl Jung once said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. We mistake these unseen scripts for destiny, unaware that they are simply unchallenged choices written by someone else's hand. But here's the truth: you are not trapped in this mural. Beliefs are not laws etched in stone, they are lenses, frames, and filters. They can be examined, altered, and replaced. With awareness, you can reclaim the brush, paint over what no longer serves you, and choose the palette that reflects who you truly are. This book is your invitation to do exactly that. Within these pages, you will uncover the beliefs you've inherited, learn to question them, and replace them with those you consciously select. Piece by piece, you will dismantle what was borrowed and begin authoring what is yours. This is not about rebellion for its own sake. It is about authorship, about stepping into the quiet but radical act of choosing your own colors and painting the life that was always meant to be yours. Chapter 1: The Invisible Chains We Wear. Imagine walking through a grand museum filled with paintings. Some glow with vibrant hues, others are muted and lifeless. A plaque beneath each one bears your name, yet as you look closer, you see the brushstrokes aren't yours. These pieces were painted by other hands, parents blending colors of caution, teachers outlining borders of acceptability, society shading in the gray of normalcy. You stand surrounded by a gallery of inherited images, convinced it's your art, unaware the brushes were never yours to hold. This is the quiet tyranny of borrowed belief syndrome. Its chains don't clang or rattle, they rest lightly on your shoulders, unnoticed until you try to step beyond their reach. It begins early. A parent says, "Money doesn't grow on trees," and suddenly abundance feels mythical. A teacher remarks, "You're not the artistic type," and the pencil you once loved grows dusty. Friends tease a bold dream, and you file it away as foolish. These moments slip by unnoticed, yet they accumulate, weaving an unseen net of rules you never chose but learned to obey. The power of such beliefs lies in their invisibility. They operate quietly in the background, shaping every decision, filtering every possibility. Cognitive science calls them schemas, mental blueprints formed through repetition and authority, etched so deeply they become indistinguishable from identity. What you believe about money, love, intelligence, or worth feels like fact, not because it is, but because it's been rehearsed for years. Like tinted glass, these beliefs color everything you see, convincing you the shade is reality itself. But beliefs are not laws, they are lenses. And lenses can be changed. Psychologists studying neuroplasticity have shown how flexible the brain truly is. Pathways forged by old assumptions can weaken and reroute. A belief like, "I'll never be good with money," is not a verdict but a habit of thought. When challenged, it loses its grip. When replaced, it rewrites behavior. Even the subtlest shift, a single counterexample, can create cracks in the frame, letting in light you didn't know was missing. Start here, identify one belief that limits you. What phrase echoes in your mind when you hesitate? Perhaps it's that "I'm not enough," or "people like me don't succeed." Write it down. Next, trace it back. Who planted it? A parent's offhand comment? A teacher's critique? Society's silent rules? Often, you'll find the belief isn't yours, it's borrowed, passed down like an heirloom no one questioned. Finally, test it. Look outward. Find someone who defies it. If you believe success demands suffering, observe those thriving joyfully. If you think creativity skipped you, notice the everyday artistry in people who started late. Each contradiction you witness chips away at the illusion of permanence. This process may feel small, almost trivial, but it's the first fracture in an old wall. With one belief exposed, others follow. The moment you see the brush in your hand, the realization that you can repaint even a single corner, you glimpse what's possible. The museum is not fixed, it is waiting for your hand. The chains of borrowed belief syndrome are light until you try to move. But once you see them, you cannot unsee them. This is your first step toward loosening them, toward reclaiming the canvas that was always yours to begin with. Borrowed beliefs feel natural because they've been rehearsed for years. Beliefs are lenses, not laws. They can be questioned and replaced. Identifying and tracing a single belief begins the process of transformation. Which belief in your life feels like an unchangeable truth, and whose voice does it truly belong to? Write down one limiting belief, trace its origin, and seek out one living counterexample today. Chapter 2: The Birth of Borrowed Beliefs. Picture a child as an open field, fertile and unmarked, ready for seeds of any kind. Into this soil fall words, gestures, and rules, each one a seed planted by someone else. A parent's worried sigh, a teacher's sharp correction, a cultural proverb repeated until it feels ancient, all of it takes root. Some seeds grow into guiding principles that nurture resilience, but others sprout as weeds, tangling around potential, shaping how that child will see the world. Borrowed beliefs are born quietly in these moments, not as deliberate choices but as inheritances passed down without question. From our earliest days, we are surrounded by authority figures whose words carry the weight of truth. Developmental psychology shows that children absorb information long before they possess the tools to analyze it. At an age when the brain is highly plastic, repetition carves neural grooves like riverbeds, directing thought and behavior without conscious effort. When a caregiver says, "Be careful, the world is dangerous," the child's brain learns vigilance. When a teacher insists, "You're not math-minded," pathways form around avoidance. These impressions do not feel imposed, they feel natural, because they shape the very wiring through which perception flows. Culture amplifies this inheritance. Communities encode beliefs in phrases that feel like wisdom. "Don't get your hopes up. People like us don't do that, play it safe." These statements, disguised as protection, create invisible fences. Even well-meaning influences can cast long shadows. A family that praises humility might unintentionally equate ambition with arrogance. A tradition that values stability may whisper that risk is reckless. These ideas travel from one generation to the next, subtly sculpting identity long before anyone notices the form taking shape. Research in social learning theory explains this process. We model what we see. Children imitate the behaviors and attitudes of those around them, internalizing them as the way things are. Beliefs about money, relationships, intelligence, and worth are not simply taught, they are demonstrated. A child who sees a parent struggle financially may unconsciously adopt scarcity thinking, regardless of whether anyone ever utters the phrase "money is hard to earn." The belief isn't spoken, it's observed, absorbed, and filed under truth. As these seeds sprout, they intertwine until they feel indistinguishable from personality. You don't just believe you're bad with numbers, you say, "I'm not a numbers person." You don't just fear risk, you claim, "I'm naturally cautious." The language of identity cements what began as external input into a self-concept that feels immovable. Yet, beneath that surface, these are echoes, other people's voices repeating in your mind, dressed as your own. To see this clearly, pause and look backward. Recall your earliest memories of what you were told about intelligence, success, love, or failure. Who spoke those words? Picture the faces. Remember their tones. Were these beliefs born of wisdom or fear? Were they truly yours, or did you inherit them as unexamined truths? This reflection isn't about blame, it's about recognition. The act of tracing a belief to its origin is like pulling a thread. What once seemed woven into your fabric begins to loosen, and suddenly, there's room to question. When you understand that borrowed beliefs are planted early and reinforced by repetition, you realize they are not destiny. They are programs, installed before you had the chance to choose. Awareness is the first interruption. Once you see that your thoughts were seeded by others, you gain the power to decide which to keep and which to uproot. Borrowed beliefs originate in early childhood through authority, culture, and repetition. These beliefs often hide as identity, making them feel permanent. Tracing beliefs to their origin is the first step to loosening their grip. What is one belief you hold today that you can trace back to an early memory of someone else's voice? Write down 3 beliefs you carry and note who or where each one came from. Chapter 3: The Disguises of False Truths. Borrowed beliefs rarely introduce themselves. They do not announce, "I am a story someone else told you." Instead, they arrive dressed as facts, so familiar and quiet that you stop noticing their presence. They live in casual phrases you repeat without thinking, in assumptions you carry unquestioned, in the silent rules you obey without knowing why. A belief like, "I'm not good at speaking in public" feels as fixed as gravity, yet gravity is real, and this belief is not. False truths hide in plain sight, shaping lives as if they were immutable laws. Consider how language cements these disguises. When you say, "I can't," it sounds like a statement of reality, not an opinion. "I'm terrible with money" slips off the tongue as naturally as saying the sky is blue. Over time, these phrases harden into identity. They move from describing a moment "I failed that test" to defining the self "I'm bad at learning." The difference is subtle but profound. Cognitive psychology calls this internalization, the shift from seeing a belief as external advice to accepting it as an intrinsic truth. Culture reinforces these disguises through repetition and social agreement. Expressions like, "dreams don't pay the bills" or "stay in your lane" are repeated so often they carry the weight of universal truth. They sound like wisdom because everyone nods along, but in reality, they are consensus, not fact. What is widely accepted is rarely questioned, and what is rarely questioned becomes invisible. A belief is most dangerous not when it is loud, but when it is quiet enough to blend into the background of daily life. False truths often masquerade as personality. You hear yourself say, "I'm just not adventurous," or "I've always been shy," forgetting that these statements likely trace back to single moments of discomfort or repeated messages you absorbed young. Neuroscience shows how memories are tethered to emotion. If an early attempt at speaking up resulted in embarrassment, your mind tags that event with a protective warning: avoid this. Over time, the warning morphs into identity. You no longer remember the single spark that lit the fire, only the heat you now live inside. Even achievements can carry borrowed beliefs in disguise. Someone praised you for being responsible, and suddenly you felt compelled to play it safe, to avoid risks that might contradict that image. You excel at pleasing others, not realizing the belief driving you is, "I am valuable only when I meet expectations." Positive reinforcement can bind just as tightly as criticism, because both write scripts in the mind: "This is who I must be." To spot these false truths, pay attention to the phrases that feel absolute. Notice the rules you follow without remembering when or why they began. Ask yourself, who benefits from me believing this? Often, you'll find the answer points outward, to parents who feared instability, to teachers who needed compliance, to social norms designed to keep people contained. None of these origins make the belief inherently true, they merely explain why it lingers. The disguise begins to unravel the moment you see it. Realizing that what feels like fact is only a borrowed lens creates distance between you and the thought. You step back and ask, "If I didn't hold this belief, what else might be possible?" That question is a crack in the wall, light leaking into a room you didn't know was dark. False truths only persist because they are unchallenged. Once revealed, they lose their power, exposing themselves not as destiny but as echoes that can finally fade. Borrowed beliefs disguise themselves as facts, identity, and cultural wisdom. Language and repetition make false truths feel unquestionable. Recognizing these disguises is the first step to dismantling them. What is one fact about yourself or the world that you've never questioned until now? Write down 3 phrases you often say or think about yourself and ask, are these facts, or borrowed beliefs in disguise? Chapter 4: The Lens Effect: How Beliefs Shape Reality. Beliefs are not passive thoughts. They are filters through which every experience is interpreted. Imagine wearing tinted glasses without realizing they are there. Everything you see appears in that hue, so naturally, you assume the world itself is colored that way. This is the lens effect of belief. It doesn't just influence what you notice, it determines what you believe is possible. A person convinced they are unlucky will spot only setbacks, while someone who believes they are resourceful will see opportunities hiding in the same circumstances. Reality bends not to objective truth, but to the lens you look through. This phenomenon is deeply rooted in how the brain processes information. Cognitive scientists describe confirmation bias as our tendency to seek evidence that supports what we already believe while filtering out anything that contradicts it. If you hold the belief, "I'm terrible with people," your mind will replay awkward encounters as proof while conveniently ignoring moments of connection. The brain prefers consistency over accuracy. It would rather reinforce an existing belief than endure the discomfort of changing it. Over time, this bias creates a feedback loop. Beliefs guide perception, perception strengthens beliefs, and the cycle repeats until it feels unbreakable. Consider how this plays out in everyday life. Someone raised to believe money is scarce sees only bills and obligations, even in moments of abundance. They overlook opportunities, dismiss raises as flukes, and feel guilty about spending. Their lens filters reality into scarcity, and in doing so, it becomes self-fulfilling. Another person who taught, "There's always a way," interprets obstacles as puzzles to solve. Faced with the same problem, they notice creative solutions that the first person's lens would never reveal. 2 people, standing in the same room, inhabit entirely different worlds because of the lenses they wear. Beliefs also influence behavior in subtle but powerful ways. Research shows that when people expect to fail, they unconsciously act in ways that bring about that failure. Psychologists call this a self-fulfilling prophecy. The belief writes the script, and behavior plays it out. A student convinced they are bad at math studies half-heartedly, approaches problems with dread, and interprets mistakes as proof rather than practice. The outcome reinforces the belief, even though the cause began in expectation, not ability. The lens effect doesn't just limit perception, it governs identity. When you repeatedly interpret experiences through a certain belief, it stops being what you think and becomes who you think you are. Saying, "I failed," is temporary. Saying, "I'm a failure," transforms an event into identity. This shift anchors the belief deeper, until it feels like part of your nature rather than an adopted lens. Yet even here, the truth remains: lenses can be swapped. To disrupt the lens effect, you must catch it in motion. The next time you feel certain about a conclusion, "This will never work, I can't handle this," pause and ask, "Through what lens am I seeing this?" Question whether that lens was chosen or inherited. Imagine for a moment looking at the same situation through a different one. What would someone who believed, "I can learn anything," or "Every problem has a solution," see here? This exercise isn't about blind optimism, it's about recognizing that perception is not fixed. When you change the lens, reality expands. You begin noticing doors that were invisible before, not because they suddenly appeared, but because your mind is no longer filtered to ignore them. Beliefs don't just color the world, they frame it. Swap the frame, and the picture changes entirely. Beliefs act as lenses that filter perception and shape reality. Confirmation bias reinforces what you already believe, creating a feedback loop. Changing your lens reveals possibilities that were always there but previously unseen. What is one belief lens you wear that limits what you notice or expect in your daily life? When faced with a challenge today, pause and deliberately ask, how would this look through a more empowering belief? Chapter 5: Cracks in the Frame, Spotting Contradictions. Every belief carries the illusion of permanence until it meets a contradiction. A single counterexample can destabilize what once felt immovable, like a hairline crack spreading across glass. When a deeply held belief collides with evidence it cannot explain, the frame around reality begins to shift. This is how borrowed beliefs unravel, not all at once, but through small ruptures that expose their fragility. Contradictions often appear in subtle moments. Someone raised to believe that wealth is reserved for the greedy meets a generous philanthropist who quietly funds schools. A person convinced they are uncreative watches a friend, equally inexperienced, paint their first canvas with joy and ease. These encounters land softly, almost imperceptibly, yet they lodge in the mind like splinters. They do not fit the inherited story, and their very existence forces a question: if this one exception is real, what else might be false? Psychologists call this dissonance. When reality contradicts a belief, the brain resists the discomfort by dismissing or rationalizing what it sees. A person may tell themselves, "That philanthropist is just an anomaly," or "my friend got lucky." But repeated exposure to contradictions erodes these defenses. Each new example creates tension between what the belief insists must be true and what the eyes plainly observe. Eventually, the effort required to maintain the old frame outweighs the cost of rethinking it. The belief begins to loosen. Consider how this works in practice. Imagine someone who believes they are destined to fail. Their world is constructed to support this view. Past mistakes replay as evidence, successes are minimized, and risks are avoided. Then they witness someone with fewer advantages succeed. The initial reaction is skepticism, but curiosity follows. How did they do it? What if failure isn't destiny but habit? In that moment, the inherited belief falters. The frame shifts enough to see beyond its edges. This process is powerful because it bypasses debate. You do not need to argue with a belief directly. You simply need to show it something it cannot explain. A single contradiction is like tapping a weak spot in a wall. Once struck, the structure is never as strong. Neuroscience supports this. The brain rewires most effectively when presented with experiences that violate its predictions. These violations force it to update old models, opening the door for new perspectives to take root. To spot these cracks, pay attention to the exceptions you instinctively dismiss. When you encounter someone thriving in a way you once believed impossible, resist the urge to explain it away. Instead, examine it closely. Ask, what if this isn't the exception? What if it's proof the rule was never real? Collect these moments deliberately. The more evidence you gather that defies an old belief, the harder it is for that belief to stand unchallenged. This is not about comparison or envy. It is about using reality itself as leverage against illusion. Each contradiction is a reminder that borrowed beliefs are not universal. They are inherited limits, propped up only by repetition and habit. When you see through them, even briefly, you glimpse the wider field of possibility they once obscured. As cracks spread, the frame of an old belief begins to crumble. What once felt absolute now feels negotiable. That small shift is everything. It signals the belief are no longer in control, you are. From here, the question is no longer whether you can change, it is how far you're willing to let those cracks widen until the frame falls away entirely. Contradictions weaken inherited beliefs by exposing their limits. Repeated evidence against a belief creates cognitive dissonance that opens the door to change. Gathering counterexamples accelerates the breakdown of false assumptions. What is one belief you hold that has already been challenged by evidence you can't ignore? Seek out one example today of a person or situation that contradicts a belief you've carried and write down what it reveals. Chapter 6. Question Everything. The Power of Curiosity. Curiosity is the crowbar that pries open the locked doors of borrowed beliefs. When you begin to ask questions about what you've always assumed to be true, you weaken the hold those assumptions have over you. Most beliefs endure not because they are valid but because they remain unexamined, sheltered from scrutiny by habit and familiarity. To question a belief is to drag it into the light and see whether it stands on its own or collapses under its own weight. The simple act of asking why can be transformative. Why do I believe this? Who told me it was true? What evidence supports it? These questions are not confrontational. They are exploratory, peeling back layers of inherited thought like wallpaper hiding the original walls. Often, when traced to their roots, beliefs reveal flimsy foundations. A remark from a frustrated teacher, a lesson meant to keep a child safe, a casual cultural phrase repeated too often, these moments rarely carry the authority we unknowingly grant them. Yet without curiosity, they become cement, holding shape long after their context is gone. Curiosity disrupts automatic thinking. Neuroscience shows that questioning engages the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for reasoning and decision-making. This interrupts the unconscious loops that govern so much of our behavior. When you ask, "Does this belief serve me?" you momentarily step outside it, observing it rather than obeying it. That shift in perspective is enough to weaken the illusion that a belief is simply the way things are. Consider someone who believes they are inherently bad with relationships. Rather than accepting this as identity, they begin asking questions. When did I first believe this? Whose voice do I hear saying it? What if it isn't a fixed trait but a learned pattern? Each question strips the belief of inevitability. They may remember a single heartbreak magnified by youth, or a parent's pessimistic advice about love. Suddenly, what felt like a lifelong truth shrinks into something far smaller, a moment, an opinion, an echo. The Socratic method, challenging ideas through relentless questioning, reveals how easily many beliefs unravel when examined. A belief like, "Success is selfish," might initially feel morally anchored, until curiosity asks, "Are there examples of generous success?" Or, "Who benefits from me thinking ambition is wrong?" Such inquiries often expose the belief as borrowed, serving the fears or needs of its source rather than the person who holds it. This realization does not just weaken the belief, it reframes the relationship to it. You stop seeing it as yours and start seeing it as theirs. Curiosity is not about cynicism or dismantling every idea, it is about discernment. It is a way of testing what deserves to stay and what can be released. Even deeply ingrained beliefs lose power when subjected to persistent inquiry. Over time, this practice becomes reflexive. You catch yourself mid-thought asking, "Is that true?" This single pause is often enough to redirect behavior and open new possibilities. The beauty of curiosity is that it replaces fear with wonder. Instead of recoiling from the discomfort of change, it invites exploration. Each question is a lantern illuminating corners of the mind long left dark. The more you ask, the clearer the room becomes, until you can see which furniture belongs and which was shoved there by someone else. Through curiosity, you claim the right to rearrange, discard, and choose anew. To question everything is not to live in constant doubt but to live in active authorship. You move from inheriting beliefs to investigating them, from assuming to understanding, from accepting to choosing. Curiosity is the first tool of liberation, and once it is picked up, the work of dismantling old walls becomes inevitable. Curiosity interrupts automatic thinking and exposes unexamined beliefs. Questioning beliefs often reveals flimsy origins that hold little authority. Persistent inquiry transforms passive acceptance into conscious choice. What is one belief you can trace back to its source by asking, "Who told me this, and why did I believe them?" Write down a belief you hold and ask 3 questions. Who gave it to me? What evidence supports it? Does it serve me now? Chapter 7. Choosing Your Colors. To reclaim authorship of your life, you must learn to choose your own beliefs the way an artist selects colors for a canvas. Until now, much of what you've believed has been handed to you, borrowed shades applied without permission, layered so thickly they obscure the original surface. But once you see these inherited strokes for what they are, you gain the power to paint over them. Choosing your own beliefs is not about adopting blind optimism or pretending away difficulties. It is about consciously selecting the perspectives that will serve you, shape you, and expand what you see as possible. This process begins with recognizing that beliefs are tools, not truths. A tool's value lies in its usefulness, not in whether it has always been there. Ask yourself, if a belief builds confidence, widens choices, and encourages growth, does it matter whether it feels familiar? Similarly, if a belief restricts, diminishes, or keeps you stagnant, why should it remain, no matter how long it has been in place? Seeing beliefs as tools frees you from the illusion that they must be defended or preserved simply because they are old. Neuroplasticity, The brain's ability to rewire itself proves that even long-standing beliefs can be reshaped. Studies show that repeated focus on new thoughts strengthens corresponding neural pathways, gradually making those thoughts easier and more automatic. When you replace, "I can't handle challenges" with "I adapt and learn quickly," it may feel forced at first, like painting over dark colors with light ones that require several coats. But with time and repetition, the new belief takes hold, and the old one fades beneath it. What once felt unnatural begins to feel like your new normal. To choose an empowering belief, start small. Select one area of life where a borrowed belief has held sway, perhaps about your capability, worth, or potential. Then, craft a belief that counters it, one that aligns with the person you wish to become. For example, if you've long believed "I'm not creative," you might adopt, "Creativity is a skill I can develop." Notice the shift. It does not demand instant genius, only a willingness to grow. This subtle reframing invites possibility rather than shutting it down. Choosing your own beliefs also requires embracing discomfort. New beliefs often feel foreign because they clash with the grooves worn by years of repetition. This unease is not proof that the belief is false, it is proof that it is new. The same brain that clings to familiar limits will resist their replacements, not out of malice but habit. Accepting this awkwardness as part of the process prevents you from mistaking it for failure. You are not pretending, you are practicing. Visual reinforcement can strengthen these chosen beliefs. Athletes and performers often use mental rehearsal, vividly picturing themselves succeeding until the brain encodes it as preparation rather than fantasy. You can do the same. Imagine yourself living as if your new belief were already true, confident during conversations, resourceful in challenges, creative in your pursuits. The mind responds to imagined experience nearly as strongly as real events, making this a powerful way to cement your chosen perspective. Over time, these conscious selections accumulate. One belief replaces two, then three, until the mural of your life shifts from something inherited to something authored. You begin seeing yourself not as a fixed product of your past but as a work in progress, actively shaped by every belief you choose. With each stroke, the colors grow brighter, more intentional, more reflective of who you truly are. To choose your own beliefs is to reclaim the brush. It is to stop living as a canvas painted by others and start becoming the artist of your own mind. Beliefs are tools meant to serve you, not fixed truths to be defended. Neuroplasticity allows new beliefs to overwrite old ones through repetition. Choosing beliefs consciously transforms identity and invites growth. What is one disempowering belief you're ready to replace, and what empowering belief will you choose instead? Write down one new belief and repeat it aloud 3 times today while imagining yourself living it fully. Chapter 8: The Awkwardness of New Beliefs. Adopting a new belief often feels like wearing clothes that don't quite fit. The sleeves hang too long, the fabric is stiff, and you catch yourself tugging at it, unsure if it suits you. This discomfort is not a sign you are doing something wrong, it is the natural friction of stepping out of the familiar. For years, borrowed beliefs have wrapped around you like a second skin. When you trade them for something new, the absence of old patterns creates unease. This is not failure, it is growth in its rawest form. The human mind favors familiarity, even when familiar beliefs are harmful. Psychologists call this the status quo bias, the preference for what is known over what is new. An old belief, like "I'm not good with change," feels comfortable simply because it has been rehearsed countless times, not because it is true. When you replace it with "I adapt quickly," the statement clashes with years of mental programming. The brain resists, trying to pull you back toward what it recognizes, not out of malice but habit. This resistance is the very terrain where transformation happens. Cognitive dissonance explains why this stage feels so strange. When your actions or thoughts don't align with long-standing beliefs, the mind experiences tension and attempts to resolve it. If you've believed for years that you are shy, standing up to speak in a meeting feels foreign, even if it is exactly what your new belief supports. In that moment, the old identity protests, whispering reminders of past discomfort. This inner conflict is proof that the old belief is loosening. The discomfort is not the barrier, it is the evidence that the barrier is cracking. At first, affirming a new belief may feel mechanical, almost hollow. Repeating "I am confident that" when you feel nervous or "I am capable" after making a mistake, it can sound like pretending. But neuroscience shows that repetition gradually rewires neural pathways, making once foreign statements more natural. Every time you rehearse a belief, whether through thought, language, or visualization, you strengthen its circuitry. The awkwardness fades, not because the belief changes, but because you change to meet it. Imagine learning to write with your non-dominant hand. The first strokes are shaky and slow. It feels unnatural, but with practice, fluidity emerges. New beliefs follow the same arc. They begin as awkward attempts, clumsy and self-conscious, before gradually becoming automatic. Each time you act in alignment with the belief, speaking up despite fear, pursuing an idea despite doubt, you teach your mind and body to trust this new direction. It helps to pair belief practice with small, tangible actions. If you are adopting "I am resourceful," choose one small problem to solve creatively each day. If you are embracing "I am disciplined," commit to one habit you can sustain easily, like making your bed or writing for 5 minutes. These actions serve as proof points, reinforcing the belief not just in thought but in lived experience. The brain thrives on evidence. Even tiny wins accumulate into powerful confirmation that the new belief fits. Over time, what once felt awkward begins to feel natural, and what once felt natural, the old borrowed beliefs, begin to feel foreign. This reversal is the hallmark of transformation. You have shifted from wearing someone else's frame of mind to inhabiting your own. The awkwardness was never a sign you were unprepared. It was the signal you were crossing into new territory, building the neural and emotional scaffolding to support your chosen self. Embrace that awkwardness. It is the in-between state where the old fades and the new takes root, where borrowed voices quiet and your own begins to grow louder. It is not a flaw in the process, it is the process itself. New beliefs feel awkward because they disrupt familiar neural patterns. Cognitive dissonance signals that old beliefs are weakening and change is underway. Small, reinforcing actions bridge the gap between adopting and embodying new beliefs. What is one new belief you've begun practicing that feels awkward, and how can you reinforce it through action? Take one small action today that aligns with your new belief, proving to yourself it can be lived. Chapter 9: Rehearsing Your Future Self. Belief change is not only mental, it is experiential. The mind responds powerfully to imagined experiences, treating them almost as if they were real. This is why rehearsing your future self, picturing life lived through chosen beliefs, is such a potent catalyst for transformation. When you vividly visualize yourself acting, thinking, and feeling in alignment with new beliefs, you train your brain to accept them as familiar. Instead of waiting for external proof before embracing change, you create internal evidence first. Neuroscience has long shown that the brain does not fully distinguish between actual events and detailed mental simulations. Athletes use visualization to improve performance, mentally running through their routines until their muscles and nerves respond as if they have practiced physically. The same principle applies to beliefs. When you repeatedly picture yourself succeeding at something tied to a chosen belief, speaking confidently, approaching challenges calmly, and creating freely, you lay down the neural pathways necessary to make those behaviors second nature. The brain rehearses the future until it becomes a plausible present. This rehearsal works best when it is immersive. Vague imagining is less effective than specific, sensory-rich scenarios. If you are adopting the belief, "I am confident," do not simply repeat the words. Picture yourself entering a room with steady posture, hearing your own voice clear and grounded, feeling the texture of calm in your body. The more detail you summon, sights, sounds, sensations, the stronger the impression left on your mind. The rehearsal becomes not just an idea but an experience stored like memory. Pairing this practice with emotion amplifies its power. Emotion signals importance to the brain, accelerating the encoding of imagined events. When you visualize your future self, allow yourself to feel what it would be like to inhabit that state. What relief, excitement, or pride would accompany it? Letting those feelings arise, even briefly, strengthens the connection between belief and identity. You are no longer merely stating, "I will be this way someday." You are embodying it in the present moment, and your mind responds accordingly. Rehearsing your future self also counters the inertia of old programming. Borrowed beliefs often run automatically, shaping behavior without conscious intent. Visualization interrupts that autopilot. Each time you practice seeing yourself differently, you loosen the grip of the past and reinforce a new default. Over time, these imagined scenarios begin influencing real choices. You find yourself speaking up without overthinking, approaching challenges with curiosity instead of dread, or pursuing ideas you once dismissed. The rehearsal becomes reality through repetition and readiness. There is a cumulative effect here. One session of visualization is not a revolution, but many sessions build momentum. Consistency signals to the brain that this new version of you is not a passing whim, but an emerging identity. Each time you rehearse, you strengthen the pathway until it feels natural. Eventually, you may look back and realize that what once felt like a distant possibility now feels normal, even inevitable. The beauty of rehearsing your future self is that it requires no external permission. You do not need circumstances to change before you begin. By practicing internally, you prime yourself for the opportunities and behaviors that will align with your chosen beliefs. The rehearsal makes you ready to act when those chances arise, turning imagined potential into lived proof. This is not fantasy, it is preparation. You are teaching your brain, moment by moment, to recognize and embody the person you have decided to become. In doing so, you close the gap between who you were and who you are becoming until the two merge seamlessly. Visualization trains the brain to accept new beliefs as familiar and achievable. Specific, sensory-rich, and emotionally charged mental rehearsal strengthens identity shifts. Consistent practice bridges the gap between imagined change and real-world behavior. What does your future self, living fully by a chosen belief, look, sound, and feel like? Spend 5 minutes today visualizing yourself acting in alignment with one new belief, engaging all senses and emotions. Chapter 10: Guarding Your Mental Gallery. Once you begin replacing borrowed beliefs with chosen ones, the work shifts from discovery to protection. New beliefs are fragile at first, like fresh paint still drying on the canvas of your mind. Without care, they can be smudged or overwritten by old influences. Guarding your mental gallery means becoming intentional about what and who you allow to leave their mark. It is not about building walls, it is about curating the environment that reinforces the identity you are cultivating. Every interaction, every piece of information, every conversation is a brushstroke. If you have chosen the belief I am capable, but you spend time with voices that constantly highlight your limitations, those strokes muddy your progress. The human mind is highly social. Research shows that we unconsciously mirror the attitudes, language, and even emotional states of those around us. Proximity to pessimism invites it in. This is why protecting your mental gallery often requires re-evaluating the inputs that shape it. Begin by noticing the sources that feed your thoughts. Which people reinforce old patterns? Which media you consume, articles, shows, social feeds, subtly affirm the beliefs you've outgrown? Often, these influences slip in unnoticed, not because they are malicious but because they are familiar. A friend who frequently doubts their own potential may unintentionally echo your past doubts. A cultural narrative glorifying struggle might undermine a belief in ease and abundance. Guarding your gallery is about awareness first, seeing how quickly unattended influences can repaint what you are working so hard to redefine. Boundaries become crucial here. This does not mean cutting ties abruptly or living in isolation, but it does mean limiting exposure to what undermines your chosen beliefs. You can choose to spend less time in conversations that circle negativity or disengage from media that contradicts the identity you are building. Simultaneously, you can increase exposure to voices that uplift and reinforce. Surrounding yourself with examples of what you aspire to normalizes those beliefs. When you see people thriving under perspectives you are adopting, it strengthens their validity in your mind. This is where intentional curation comes in. Consider your mental gallery as a space you are responsible for maintaining. Each belief is a piece you have selected, and your job is to keep it illuminated while removing what clashes. This might involve reading books or listening to podcasts aligned with your new direction, joining communities where your desired mindset is shared, or even revisiting spaces in nature or solitude that quiet old noise and anchor you in clarity. These choices are not decorative, they are structural, reinforcing the new neural pathways you've created through repetition and rehearsal. Guarding your mental gallery also means catching old beliefs as they try to re-enter. Familiar thoughts have a way of resurfacing, especially in moments of stress. When they appear, treat them not as failures but as echoes, reminders of where you came from. Name them, pause, and reaffirm the chosen belief that replaces them. Over time, this practice strengthens the contrast between what belongs in your gallery and what does not. The brain learns, through repetition, that certain thoughts are no longer welcome and redirects more easily toward the ones you've installed. The more you guard your gallery, the clearer and brighter it becomes. You notice your mind feeling less cluttered, your choices aligning naturally with the beliefs you've cultivated. This is how identity stabilizes, not through a single breakthrough, but through consistent curation of the environment that feeds it. Protecting your chosen beliefs is not a restriction, it is preservation of the space where your authentic self can thrive without interference. New beliefs are fragile and require a supportive environment to take root. Guarding your mental gallery involves curating influences and reinforcing chosen beliefs. Boundaries and intentional input stabilize identity and prevent old beliefs from resurfacing. What influence in your life most subtly reinforces an old belief you are working to replace? Identify one input, person, media, or habit that weakens your chosen beliefs and limit your exposure to it today. Chapter 11: Living Authored, Not Inherited. Living authored means stepping fully into the role of creator rather than inheritor. It is the moment you stop merely questioning old beliefs and start actively embodying the ones you've chosen. This shift is subtle but profound. Instead of constantly undoing the past, you begin building forward. Your days become guided less by reaction to borrowed voices and more by deliberate alignment with the truths you have installed. The mural of your life, once crowded with the strokes of others, now reflects your hand in every detail. This transition happens quietly. There is no sudden announcement or dramatic transformation. Rather, you notice it in the small decisions that no longer feel conflicted. Where you once hesitated, second-guessing yourself through the filter of outdated scripts, you now act with clarity. A belief like "I am capable" no longer needs repeating because it lives in your behavior, how you speak, what you pursue, and the way you hold yourself in everyday moments. This is what it means to live authored, when belief and action are so entwined that they become indistinguishable. Research in identity-based change supports this progression. When behaviors align consistently with chosen beliefs, they reinforce each other until they form a stable sense of self. You no longer simply practice new thoughts, you inhabit them. Each choice becomes another brushstroke in your authored life, deepening the colors you've selected. Even challenges, once triggers for old borrowed narratives, now serve as canvases where you reaffirm your autonomy. A setback is no longer proof of inadequacy but an opportunity to practice resilience under your own terms. Living also changes how you relate to external voices. The opinions and judgments that once shaped your path lose their hold because they no longer intersect with the framework you've built. When someone offers an expectation that clashes with your chosen beliefs, it registers as noise rather than direction. This does not make you rigid, it makes you anchored. You can listen without absorbing, consider without conforming. Your internal compass has grown louder than inherited maps. An authored life carries a different quality of energy. Instead of drifting along tracks laid down by others, you feel the momentum of intentional movement. Decisions become clearer not because they are easier but because they align with a cohesive narrative you've written for yourself. The friction of contradiction lessens, and what once felt like effort begins to feel natural. You are no longer trying to become someone else, you are simply living as who you have decided to be. Yet, this is not a finish line. Living authored is an ongoing practice. Beliefs continue to evolve as you do, requiring periodic refinement. Just as an artist steps back from the canvas to adjust, you revisit and revise your chosen truths as new experiences expand your understanding. The difference now is that you hold the brush. You no longer wait for permission or validation to alter the strokes. You adjust instinctively, confident in your authorship. This stage often surprises those who reach it. The absence of old mental noise creates a spaciousness that once seemed unimaginable. You find yourself responding to life rather than bracing against it, guided less by defense and more by creation. What began as dismantling borrowed beliefs has become something greater, an ongoing dialogue between who you are and who you are becoming, painted in real time by your own hand. To live authored is not to claim perfection but ownership. It is to walk daily within a gallery that feels unmistakably yours, to see every choice and thought as another deliberate stroke on an ever-expanding canvas. In this space, your life is no longer an inheritance, it is a signature. Living authored means embodying chosen beliefs until they naturally guide behavior. Consistent alignment between belief and action stabilizes identity. Authorship is ongoing, evolving as you refine your truths and add new layers to your canvas. What recent decision or action reflects your shift from inherited beliefs to authored living? Identify one area of your life where you can make a choice today that fully aligns with a belief you have consciously chosen. Take care and be well.